So what we have is the first layer, okay, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh layer of the periodic table. And we have 18 this way, okay? And 18, well, first it starts out with 2. Okay, then it goes to, is it 16? No, it doesn't. So it doesn't have. So it has the 12 and the 4. So maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I would need to look. Because we know we've got the structure of the periodic table. And then we end up with, there's a gap, right? So, and that's, okay. So here we have the 4, that's helium, that's hydrogen, and then we end up with the P, and then in these parts we end up with the lanthanides, and that's the 28, F in here. We have, so these are P orbitals. Let's get that right. That corresponds to the lanthanides, which are the F. So these are D, and this is the S. Okay, and does this side S as well? Yes, it is. Okay, so we have an interesting geometry where the P are 12, the D are 20, the lanthanides are 28, the S's are actually 2 and 2. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, these ones equals 16. These ones equals, it's 4 plus 12 plus 20. So that's 32. 36. So even number providing stability. The 28, when that comes you've got is 4 plus 12 plus 20 plus 28. So 28 and 36, 50, 64. So here's where the 64 comes in. From the F, from the D, from the P, from the S. So here we have number theory, and then how the structure of the periodic table is associated with the geometry of numbers and stability of symmetry. And the geometry of the various orbital structures around that symmetry state. So what I did was really just look at inverse square law relationships around this as the point source, and then looking at these as point sources, right? So these become point sources. Now there are 4 point sources, and again we get, I'll rub some stuff out. Okay, so point, 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 point. Okay, so that's S3. Okay, so then it's like, okay, if we go through this, then you would think, okay, so I went and I do that again, I do that one. So again, I get the idea of 4 in the S, and then so that's where the S comes from, the nucleus, the 4, and then the idea of going through these ones provides the wavelength to get this one. Okay, so what we're doing really is creating the understanding of inverse square law relationship within the structure of the atom. So there should be 12 there. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And we've got the 1, 2, 3, 4. Four in, so that's 1s, this is 2s. Okay, 4 in the 1s, and then 4 in the 2s orbital. So what we have is the ability to use inverse square law relationships in order to create a line of sight through the geometry of the sphere of the s orbital, providing the ability to look down into that point and to come out of that and then create the geometry of inverse square law relationships within the structure of the atom itself. So this provides a different viewpoint from the current standard model that we have of how electrons are arranged within an atom, and gives a relationship of inverse square law within the atom structure itself, not using quantum mechanics, statistics, and probability, but empirically seeing it. How did you get to this point from where we were previously? This is only practical and possible through non-measurement. So the geometric symmetry that is present within the structure of an atom only comes when you do not disturb it. This is the quantum state of symmetry within single individual atoms that come from being contained within a field. Now I can show you what the field is that I use and how I contain single atoms. This is really the juicy stuff around the structure. Okay, benzene ring, an aromatic ring. At this point here, we can have one atom. There are pi electrons. That single atom is known as a monoatomic. There's geometric symmetry in the structure of the atom within that monoatomic field created by the pi electrons and the coordination chemistry that is holding it there. When that is lithium, as in, well, you can put energy, light energy, electron capture, K plus, or electron capture. So this is why lithium is given to people who have bipolar. This lithium can take those electrons in the form of hydrogen. So hydrogen in its quantum state can become hydrogen in its asymmetric state in this structure of the benzene aromatic ring when it is part of the neurotransmitter. So if you have calcium there, adding hydrogen to calcium from the symmetry to asymmetry produces an isotope. And that is unstable due to the geometric unbalanced nature. So there's more neutrons than protons, or more protons than neutrons. Okay, so I showed you the symmetry between protons and neutrons and how they create photons together. So when this is happening within our subconscious mind, the chemistry of light in the form of the symmetry state of hydrogen being incorporated into a monatomic mineral bound to the aromatic ring of our neurotransmitters, dopamine, serotonin, we are changing the isotopes within our body, creating asymmetry or imbalance. This results in isotopic changes and changes in mineral structure. The geometry of hydrogen from this state, which is symmetrical, to this state, which is asymmetrical. So in this case, it would be an added proton, so we get more protons and neutrons. So in the periodic table, we already know the half-life of all the different isotopes. Some of them are very, very stable, and some of them are very, very unstable. When your mind is creating these unstable isotopes, it releases the energy from a proton transferring to a neutron, or a neutron transferring to a proton, in the form of beta decay, and that is releasing photons of light at particular energy states. So we've gone right back into understanding geometric structures of hydrogen and its quantum state, relating it to neurotransmitter function, and then providing an understanding how the storage or the actual creation of new isotopes plays an important role in the storage of new structures within the brain. So it's actually creating from hydrogen, from water, the ability to produce new atoms. And that is really the subconscious mind and how it's operating using physics. It's a little bit of information on how to understand what's going on. The literature says that we do not understand the mechanism of lithium in bipolar, but if you substitute lithium for calcium, or for iron, or for any of the other elements, you're going to get a different geometry of water around that structure, and you're going to have a different frequency of energy being released based on the half-lives of the different lithium atoms. Okay, all the different lithium isotopes. So the mechanism is physics, and that's why quantum biology is incredibly important to study. It actually provides the physics basis for health and well-being, or for dis-ease. Knowing these mechanisms in the physics of our biology provides an understanding of how to restore well-being back into a person who has had a mental health episode. I think with this information being released, hopefully it can help people realize that providing the right monoatomics into our mind is critical to provide stability, and where memory comes from and where emotional well-being comes from, for me at least, is actually being able to show and share this type of information so that we can start moving away from the model that we have been using based on some correct assumptions. So I look forward to getting some feedback from you all about what you think of my ideas and my model. Okay, so if we start just looking at hydrogen, what we can see is that there's a proton and an electron. Okay, so we also know that the proton, when blown up, is made of three quarks, and those quarks in the supersymmetry model have both a plus and minus. We have a center between those. Each electron is actually containing two Planck lengths. So the electron Planck length, Planck length. So really we need to find out where these Planck lengths have originated from, therefore understanding the actual geometry of the electron. So because light has a right-handed rule to it, I went right back to the concept of Einstein, right? So the geometry in Einstein's equation. Now you have to imagine hitting that point. What's going to happen as it passes through the board and out the door and into the universe, and coming the opposite way as well, toward the camera, this direction and that direction. So it's coming in both directions at once. Okay, so from that center point, it's coming in and out. So what we have is the concept of balance of opposites. Keep playing with those kind of concepts and you can start to see that if you hit that middle point, the bottom parts go in. Okay, if the bottom parts are going in, then this part is coming forward. So that's forward and that's back. That's back and that's forward. And again, this is back, forward, back, forward, back, forward. Okay, back, forward. So the idea is that there's a spinning orientation of the Planck length. Okay, so SARS-CoV-2 has grabbed the attention of the world. It's a huge challenge to develop a vaccine that is going to target this. So my approach is very, very different. It's understanding within our biology we have a ability to destroy pathogens. The basis of that destruction is this kind of apoptotic engine that lies within that provides an ability to break things down. So when you break things down into smaller and smaller pieces, you eventually get to an electron. The energy that's inherent within the structure of the electron is significant. So how do we harness that energy? Well, that's where we see opposites, and from that point of opposite we can understand that there's tension between that, and it's the distance between that tension that you're trying to harness, because it really wants to go back to being in a kind of harmonic equilibrium. So if it gets out of equilibrium or asymmetry, that state of asymmetry is quite unstable and leads to the release of energy as photons of light. Okay, so we're going to have to change our perspective of reality in order to understand what I'm talking about. So in hydrogen, you have 3 electrons as the proton. We have 1 electron as the electron running around the outside. So this is an asymmetrical system, and to get balance, you need to have 2 hydrogen atoms bound together so the electrons can be shared. Okay, so the sharing of those 2 electrons is a bond. I see that as a photon. So the photon that is generated between 2 hydrogens is the bond length. When you look at hydrogen with respect to the size of, or the distance between the nucleus and the electron, and the different orbital structures and the different isotopic forms, then you start to learn that symmetry, as in deuterium, provides stability, whereas asymmetry, as in tritium, provides instability. So the instability of asymmetry provides the release of light energy from an atom, and that light energy is available if you can create asymmetry within atoms within your body. So that is a process of physics within your body, and that's where quantum biology really meets alchemical transformation of minerals and monatomics, and the production of high energy light within us that provides a new vitality and well-being. So I've got a product which I think is pretty amazing. It's called OBehave. The technology behind it is really derived from an understanding and a new model that I've developed called supersymmetry inversion. This model provides me the understanding of how the universe works, and I'm using that and those principles to develop therapeutic products for people that they can try. I haven't done widespread clinical evaluation, except this is food used topically to provide high energy, short-lived electrons to allow really transformational healing and well-being. When you see what the product can do and how it changes structure depending on frequency of energy, you can start to get an idea of, well, these are the properties that the subconscious mind also has. The ability to see and respond and change shape and geometry in order to provide insight
And when you realize that the human retina actually, or the anatomy, provides the context that we're looking within ourselves, not external to ourselves at all, and all is within, then it's quite a big paradigm shift in the way that one has to operate in this world. So the challenge is, well, what is mine and what is not? And the challenge is, how do I make a world that I want to live in, considering the complexities of the world around us and what we need to do to survive? So they are all our challenges, really, that we need to face together as humanity at this time when things are changing very quickly. I think we need to, in a way, slow down to speed up. We need to realize that the subconscious mind is providing us so much more information that when we gain access to it, when you have developed the skill set necessary to access your subconscious, to no longer be afraid of things that kind of take you away from that, to stop you from going there because you have so much pain or you've had experienced a lot of trauma. When you get to work through those processes and actually get to the point of connecting back into your subconscious state of being, that creative part of you that is allowed to be open and free, that is a very beautiful place to be, and a place which my product has helped me get to. Why? Because it's the biochemistry that the product is doing is stimulating the biochemistry of my subconscious. So that provides the conscious mind the ability to connect back into the subconscious, and has helped me do the healing work that I've needed to do in order to overcome some of my, I guess, emotional baggage from childhood. So I hope my product will be able to help with your own mental health and well-being issues that you potentially could have. For me, it was really my mother's suicide when I was 11 that caused such a major rip in my heart, and it's taken a long time to heal that wound. I would also just like to say that it doesn't happen straight away. It's a bit of a journey. For me, it was 36 years before I could really open up about that. And she was 36. So there's this symmetry within my own story and my own journey, which allowed me to perceive and understand what was going on. To give you some kind of further details and insight, the Planck length, which is the smallest thing that physicists identified as 1.6 times 10 to the negative 35 of a meter. So that's the distance in that an electron has traveled from the Bose-Einstein condensate of helium after 13.8 billion light years. So the inverse square law of the Planck length provides, if you square root that, then you actually get 4 times 10 to the negative 18 of a meter as the distance of the diameter of an electron. So now we can start to use universal numbers for Planck lengths, electrons, and really look at distance as a way of determining mass, a way of determining strength of interaction. And if we keep utilizing the Planck length as the length unit that we want to understand everything by, then the inverse square law relationship associated that gives you the connection of the distance that light has traveled after 13.8 billion light years as the alpha particle from the Bose-Einstein condensate. So when you start to use those kind of numbers and see the inverse square law relationship from the beginning of time, then you are able to comprehend prior to time, and physics says all time's happening all the time. So then we understand, well, the emission of alpha particles may still be responsible for the expansion of the universe now, and that Hubble constant. And it would also be responsible for, the decay of the alpha particle and the generation of matter. So there's a lot of information that came from the supersymmetry inversion model, and the experience that I had, which was pretty overwhelming for both me and the people around me at the time when I came up with the model back in 2013, through kind of connection of oneness between Einstein and kind of the perception of an inner reality of light, which I have come to terms with from the perspective of seeing the Lehman lines, transition lines in hydrogen, and how that was stimulated was through this kind of Fenton biochemistry that's happening in our subconscious minds. So I think the transition lines of hydrogen give us an atomic resolution insight within that conscious reality. Well, at least in the subconscious reality, with our conscious reality being quite limited, and that the perception is really, I guess, limited to those kind of wavelengths of light that we consider to be light. But the geometry of the transitions of the electron within hydrogen allows you to perceive not only the Balmer lines, which is in the visible wavelength, but the Lehman lines, which is in the UV, and the Paschen lines, which is more in the infrared.
This one is going, if you look, that's this way. If you're looking down on it, it's clockwise. So, clockwise, C. If you're looking from the other way, it's counterclockwise. Okay, from here going back, that's counterclockwise and clockwise. So all of a sudden we've got orientation in the model where you can have in this domain, okay, CC, in this domain, C and CC. So with clockwise and counterclockwise spins, there is a spinning vortice that is being created where this quadrant is going clockwise, this quadrant counterclockwise, this quadrant's clockwise, this quadrant's counterclockwise. If we go here, let's look here, the boundary at this point is clockwise counterclockwise, the boundary at this point is clockwise counterclockwise, the boundary at this point is clockwise counterclockwise, and the boundary at this point is clockwise counterclockwise. The center has a balance so an electron contains EM. The light coming in this direction has a spin up of clockwise and a spin to the right of counterclockwise. So if you have clockwise counterclockwise, in this one here you will have the counterclockwise. So if that's getting messy, try down here. Okay, So if we go C, 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 negative C, C, negative C. Negative C, C corresponds to clockwise, negative C corresponds to counterclockwise. So in other words, that's equivalent to that, and that's equivalent to that. So it's either spinning one way or the other, depending on the orientation from what you look. Like the Earth. So I see it as a vortex of clockwise spin and counterclockwise spin, and the interaction points that are going is what C squared is. So E M. So this model provides an understanding of the interaction of two spinning vortices of Planck lengths creating electromagnetism through that interaction.